everyone, and welcome to your Frontier Opening Bell. It's Monday. This is how the bell goes for Frontier Africa Opening Bell, the start of a new business and markets week across Frontier Africa. Let me introduce you to my guests and Thuletho Zwane from South Africa. She's a Southern Africa region analyst and markets commentator. Good morning, Thuletho.
Good morning, Boason.
Hey, how's it doing? What's the weather conditions there? It's really hot in Nigeria. Tell me.
Yes, we are always complaining about how hot it is in South Africa. It's extremely hot for us, but I think compared to you, it's more acceptable. But we've been having a bit of a heat wave for the last few days now.
Yeah, we're doing around 30, 32, 34. It's really hot. But if you consider where we are in the equator, but again, I'm sure the weather is going to start cooling down anytime soon. We're getting to the deep end of the month of March, by the way, and all of that. But let's see whether the markets are really as hot as the weather across a number of Frontier African markets. Thuletho will be bringing us up to speed with a bigger picture of the Southern African region markets. But let me just walk you through just a snapshot of our markets. The Nigerian stocks finished 0.75% in the green. The BRVM in Cote d'Ivoire was better by 0.38%. Egyptian market started on Sunday with the Egyptian currency devaluation. The rate hike we saw last week, 600 basis points to the upside, 27.25%. The stock market is taking in a whole lot of foreign portfolio investors. So the stock market in Cairo yesterday, Sunday, started 5.17%, a roaring start to the market week start in Cairo. You've got the Nairobi market down by 0.5%. Just GSE fell just about 18 basis points in Joburg. Let me take you through the East African top stories as we start the new week. Airtel Uganda is paying about $40 million roughly as gross dividend to shareholders. It's the first post-IPO of Airtel Uganda that did an IPO and listed on the Uganda Stock Exchange. East Africa Growth Holding says it's buying about 10.13% stake in the I&M Group, which involves considering the I&M Bank in Rwanda and within the East African corridor. Rwanda will be hosting the 2024 edition of the Africa CEO Forum. That will be between the 16th and the 17th of the month of May. Quite a whole lot to cover in the month of May. The EFDB annual meetings will be taking place towards the last week of that month in Nairobi, Kenya. Quite a whole lot to digest. And Somalia and Turkey said they've signed an energy cooperation deal, which will be good for the Horn of Africa's economy, while Sudan economy is on the brink of collapse after years of civil war. In the meantime, Mzimbe becomes the first female country senior partner for PwC in Tanzania. Well, let me quickly weigh in on West Africa. Nigeria's posted 1.4 trillion naira trade deficit in the last quarter for 2024. That's no good news, as it were. But of course, everyone understands the election year last year, 2023 for Nigeria, with the whole currency redesign, as well as the removal of fuel subsidy and, of course, the currency flotation. The Naira could recover. Some good news we got over the weekend. Could recover to as much as 1,200 against the dollar. And that's according to Goldman Sachs, two office analysts who released a report on Nigeria over the weekend. The currency, the Naira is doing around roughly 1,600 at the official window against the US dollar. It's touched roughly 2,000 against the dollar since the currency devaluation. The Debt Management Office in Nigeria over the weekend on Friday listed 350 billion naira sukuk bonds on the Nigerian exchange, that's the NGX, as well as FMDQ Securities Exchange. And those listings will help those who did not participate at the primary auction to be part of it at the secondary window. Montreal Exchange says it's going to help create the BRVM market for byproducts. The BRVM in Cote d'Ivoire, which is for French-speaking West African countries, is looking to move on beyond vanilla stocks to go into derivatives. And that's the good news. The Gabon is issuing 150 billion CFA franc worth of loans to finance government development plan, while Mamadi Dekite has been named the Director General of the International Bank for Commerce and Industry in Cote d'Ivoire. And that's one of the specialized DFI for Commerce and Industry in Cote d'Ivoire, which is also on the BRVM. Let's move on to Southern Africa. And I want you to take this up from here to later, because I saw Namibia's exports at about 12 billion Namibian dollar for the month of January. And of course, some Moody's also upgrading the deposit rankings of or rating some of South African banks like Nets, Standard Bank, ABSA, and others. I'm sure you've published your week look ahead already for the week. So tell me.
So I'll just give a bigger perspective about important data that came out last week. So in South Africa, for example, we had our GDP numbers come out for the last quarter of 2023. So South Africa escaped a technical recession, growing by 0.1% quarter on quarter. This was a rebound from a 0.2 contraction the previous quarter. So while we escaped this recession, it doesn't take away from the fact that South Africa has had very, very poor growth over the last number of years. Taking a slightly longer perspective, it is very depressing to note that the economy barely grew by 1%, larger compared to pre-pandemic 2019 quarter four. The data show that 6 out of 10 sectors contributed positively to growth, and that the mining sector and the manufacturing sectors were also quite positive. What was interesting is that household consumption also saw a slight increase. Of course, this was interesting because we know that inflation numbers have been very high and interest rates have been very high as well, hitting those household consumption numbers. Household consumption contributes around 60% to South Africa's GDP. So this was a very key number to look into. Another important issue that came out last week, an independent consortium led by VGBE recently presented an Eskom coal power stations report to the National Treasury and South Africa's finance minister. The report was conducted between March and May 2023, and it basically highlighted that dysfunctional management was the root cause of the low energy availability factor that South Africa's coal fleet has been experiencing. We know that we've been getting those back-to-back power outages in the country. Other issues that were identified include excessive bureaucracy, centralized management, and the lack of action despite solutions being suggested. Moving now to Zimbabwe. Zimbabwe's currency collapse has been fueling inflation quite recently. Last week, we saw Zimbabwe price inflation rise to 34.8% year on year. From 34.8% year on year in January to 47.6% in February. The resurgence in the inflationary pressures, they stemmed largely from faltering Zimbabwean dollar, with the local unit losing around 60% of its value in just over 2 months. Now, this is despite the Reserve Bank of Zimbabwe's efforts to tame inflation. Zimbabwe currently has the world's highest policy rate of 130%, and this actually has brought the credibility of the country's central bank to the fore as well. Moving along to Mauritius. The Bank of Mauritius is expected to start its easing cycle in the first quarter of 2024. This is despite inflation increasing by 1 percentage point. Inflation accelerated to 6.2% year on year in February. However, there's general consensus that since core inflation is relatively stable, when the Bank of Mauritius meets this afternoon, they will not look too negatively towards the latest inflation numbers, and they may they will still continue their easing cycle in the first quarter. If we move on to, If we move on to Zambia.
Yes.
Zambia's purchasing manager index fell deeper into contractionary territory as money shortages worsen. You know, the Standard Bank S&P Global PMI came out last week. It showed that the PMI fell to 47.3 from 49.2, making this the third straight month of deterioration in private sector conditions. So it's not looking very good out there for Zambia.
Yeah, but and for this week, thank you, Thuletho. I'm sure for this week, there's quite a couple of economic earnings or economic data. I'm sure the earnings season is still there across a number of African SSA markets, but I'm sure you've got a couple of economic data that also you're on tap for you, on card for you this week.
Yes. I think, as we mentioned earlier, that, you know, Mauritius, the Bank of Mauritius is meeting today to announce its latest interest rate decision. The interest rate was last recorded at 4.5%. The rate averaged around 4.18% from 2006 to 2024, reaching an all-time high of 9.25% in June 2007 and a record low of 1.85% in 2020. You know, and as we mentioned that the recent acceleration in inflation is not expected to actually move monetary policy sentiment because core inflation actually remains the same. The delayed pass-through effect of tight monetary policy conditions is also expected to keep a lid on inflationary pressures in Mauritius. On Tuesday, which is tomorrow, Angola's inflation rate will also be announced by the country's statistics agency. Angola's inflation rate accelerated for 9 straight months, reaching 21.99% in January. This is up from 20.0% in December, marking the highest reading since 2022. You know, inflation has been increasing since mid-2023 due to the weak kwanza and the removal of fuel subsidies in early June. Since the beginning of the second half of 2023, the National Bank of Angola has been limiting the exchange of foreign currency, and banks have reported some difficulties in purchasing dollars outside of an increasingly narrow exchange rate margin, you know. And then also to look forward to, on the 15th of March, the National Bank of Angola will also announce its interest rate decision. It left key policy rates steady at 18% during its regular meeting in January, after raising it by 100 basis points in November. Price pressures have intensified since, you know, in the recent months, driven by the removal as fuel subsidies, as we said, in June, and the weaker kwanza. So we just keeping an eye out for that to see what will happen. And then back to South Africa. South Africa in focus this week will be the production data, manufacturing data, and mining data is coming out on Thursday. It will be released by the country's StatSA. The electricity intensive sectors have been suffering quite a lot, you know, because of the rotational power outages, and most recently the issue at the logistics sector. In the logistics sector, we know that Transnet, the state-owned entity, has been experiencing a lot of issues at its ports. So this obviously has impacted production and activity in both mining and manufacturing sectors. Mining is expected to decline on a monthly basis, but manufacturing might increase at a very small percent.
Interesting, quite a whole lot. You've got a whole Southern African markets and economies covered. I'm sure, Thuletho, you've got a whole lot on your plate on a daily basis, trying to spruce them together. Quite a whole lot to watch. We're looking at Africa's most advanced economy, which is South Africa. You've got a whole lot happening within that particular region. If you look at Zimbabwe, Zambia, Mauritius, you're looking at a few others like that. Thuletho, thank you very much for bringing us up to speed. Quite a whole lot to watch on economic data for this week, as always. But let me just quickly, North Africa, where we're going to wrap it up with the Moody's. revising Egypt's credit outlook to positive. That's the news after the deal that was struck last week. Egypt trying to be in line for further funding support from the IMF, which could be up to $8 billion, with other countries in the region within the Arab world and elsewhere weighing that figure could be up to $20 billion for Egypt. So that's some good news. Foreign portfolio investment, foreign direct investment, all President Al-Sisi's team working on. Then you got Tunisia's investment value up roughly 70% for the month of January, while Morgan Stanley says this is further support for Egypt from the World Bank and the European Union anytime soon. That you can expect with what was seen recently with the currency flotation and, of course, the interest rate hike by the Bank of Egypt. Algeria's Sonatrach in the energy sector, and Italian Tecnimont says they have a $1 billion deal sort of for a petrochemical plant in Algeria. That's some good news with a handshake across the Mediterranean from Italy. That's the private sector where it is. And finish up in corporate news, Credit Duma Hawk says its consolidated net banking income was up 14%. That's reporting for full year 2023, January to December. And those are your headlines from North Africa, just to wrap up today's edition of Frontier Opening Bell. Thank you so much, Thuletho Zwane from South Africa, bringing us up to speed on all markets in southern part of the continent. Thank you so much. All right, thank you so much there. To have a great week ahead and see you back on Monday on Frontier Opening Bell. And that's the show for today. You can watch the show again online. Go to frontierafricareports.com and you can follow us on our social media handles as well. I am Boason Omofaye. Bye for now.